باعتبار it is Laylatul Jum'ah, and Thursday night is the night in which we have a number of traditions that outline the importance of remembering our marhumin and our marhumat who have traveled into another realm of existence. Remembering them throughout the week is important. Khassatan Laylatul Jum'ah, Thursday night which is associated with Sayyid al-Shuhada. For as we begin these majalis, inshallah al-Mubarakah, majalis Fatimiyah, let us begin with the recitation of a Surah Al-Fatiha for our marhumin and our marhumat. And as you recite the Surah Al-Fatiha for these 20 seconds, 30 seconds, also plant the seed in your mind that as we are reciting Surah Al-Fatiha for other people, tomorrow there are those who will recite Surah Al-Fatiha for us. And this becomes a shake to reality. And before this, Thursday night is also Laylatul Shifa'ah, inshallah, on the name of Sayyidat Nisa'il Alameen. So 5 times we recite Amma Yujibu, followed with the Surah Al-Fatiha for our Yujibu al-Mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su' Amma yujibu al-Mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su' عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء اللهم إنا نسألك بحق محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين والأئمة الراشدين من آل طه وياسين اللهم اشفي مرضانا. Ya Allah, by the sake of Ali Muhammad, mu'mineen and mu'minat who are not in the best of health, you grant them shafa'ah in the fastest of times and give us health to be able to implement and to practice and to preach your religion so long as we are alive, Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقه بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد صلى الله على محمد وعلى محمد وعن شرف الرجل. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم وعلى غاصبي حقوقهم وعلى منكري فضائلهم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين آمين رب العالمين. أما بعد، قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أمروا إلا أن يعبدوا الله مخلصين له الدين حنفاء وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ صدق الله العلي العظيم وآمنا به. نوروا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. أحبائي, آية القرآنية الشريفة from Surah Al-Bayyinah, verse number 5, outlines for us or summarizes for us the entire message of 124,000 Anbiya from Adam until Khatam. And when you look into this, you will find that the summary of the deen of these 124,000 divinely appointed prophets is summarized within 5 institutions, 5 concepts. A person might come and say, how can there be a summary of the message of 124,000 Anbiya when we know that differences of religion or the differences of the perception of religions exist due to the different prophets that were sent? So for example, the Christians with Christianity and the Jews on the basis that they follow the Torah on the deen of Nabi Musa and so on and so forth. Yet you find the Quran actually negates the multiplicity of religions preached by these 124,000 prophets. The actual message was one, which is why if you were to go back to Surah Ali Imran, you will find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Inna ad-deena indallahil Islam. Wa ma ikhtalafu alladhina utul kitaba. And the people who were given the books, yani the Ashabul Tawrat and the Ashabul Injil, only fell into differences after the demise of their respective prophets as a result of enmity after Haqq was manifested between them. And therefore you find that the message of Nabi Isa, the message of Nabi Musa, the message of Adam and Ibrahim and Yusuf and Yaqub, all of this deen message was one. The deen, the religion was one. And the summary of this entire deen is captured in Surah Al-Bayyinah, verse number 5. They have not been commanded except illa wa ma umiru illa ayya'budullah. Number 1, ibadatullah, the worship of Allah, which begins with tawheed. Ya'budullah, number 1, ibadah, tawheed. Number 2, mukhlisina. Mukhlisin, yani a deen of worship that has ikhlas. Number 2. Number 3, hunafa. Hunafa means to be on the path of haqq. Number 4, iqamatus salat wa yuqimuna salat. Number 5, wa yu'tuna zakat. The summary of the message of 124,000 Anbiya from Adam to Khatam revolves around Tawheed and the Ibadah. Number 2, Ikhlas. Number 3, to be on the path of Haqq. Number 4, Salat. And number 5, Zakat. And the Zakat over here has a tafsir, which is a majlis on its own in the future, inshallah, if we have the tawfiq. But in general, it means to spend in the way of Allah Azza wa Jal, as opposed to the definition which is khas, the definition which is particular to the books of fiqh. If you understand this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then goes on to say, these 5 concepts that make up Islam, that make up the deen, that make up the message of 124,000 Anbiya, Allah Azza wa Jal then goes on to say, وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. This deen which encompasses these 5 institutions is the deen which is qayyimah. Deenul qayyimah meaning what? Qayyimah in Arabic language from qayyim, yani a deen that has value. So we understand, and into, as lovers of Ali Muhammad, as followers of Ali Muhammad, who read the Quran and do tafsir of the Quran, bayn al-qawsayn, between brackets, tara, tafsir of the Quran is more important than reading of the Quran. Tafsir of the Quran is more important than being a hafiz of the Quran. Being a hafiz al-Quran in its place, reciting Quran in its place. But tafsir of the Quran, to understand the meanings of the message within the Quran, takes the highest level of ahammiyah, importance. For deenul qayyimah, meaning a deen that has value. Shalom, if you have currency, you have paper, currency is a paper. This paper has a value attached to it. But if you take a normal piece of paper which is not a recognized currency, it doesn't have value. So from here we understand at a very surface level that deen, there are 2 types of deen. 2 types of religions. There is a religion which actually has a value in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there is a perception of religion. When you think you are following the religion, but aslan it has no value in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is our point of discussion for tonight's majlis. Which deen is a deen that has value and is accepted by Allah? Islam as a religion, Allah Azza wa Jal is saying, is Islam as a deen, there is a deen that has value. Meaning that, contrary to this, there is a version of Islam, aslan, that has no value. And this is what we want to identify today. For we come to the next point of our lecture, the next point of our discussion, is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ, this is the deen, this is the Islam that has value, the Islam that is accepted by Allah. What is the meaning of Deenul Qayyimah? I have to ask myself, what is the intended meaning behind the usage of this word within the Quran? And hence, I begin a journey of tafsir to understand what is in the Quran. And in order for me to understand what is in the Quran, I need to have a marja. Marja meaning, in its linguistic sense, a point of return. Ahibai, when you open any verse of the Holy Quran, Fulan could understand something from the Quran, Fulan will understand something else, and Fulan will understand the third thing. And what happens is that Quran becomes a prisoner of interpretation. If you were to open any single given verse of the Holy Quran, including verses that are of absolute simplicity, such as Qul huwallahu ahad, the simplest verse of the Quran, Qul huwallahu ahad, if you were to open the interpretation of what, meaning what? Translation is God is one. Sahilola, Qul huwallahu ahad, say Allah is one. If you were to go back to the interpretation, you will find that people differ on the meaning of the word ahad. Fulan says something, Fulan says something else, the third person says something which is contrary. For you find that if a person, if mankind was to rely upon themselves in deducing the intended meanings of the Quran, you find that we come up with multiple interpretations, and some of these interpretations are directly contradictory to each other. So both of them cannot be haqq. The qualities, characteristic of haqq is that two interpretations that claim to be a representation of haqq cannot contradict each other. Haqq can never be contradictory in nature. Just like the way the ulama or the scholars of logic, the scholars of mantiq, even if it is Aristotelian logic, they tell you reality cannot be captured within a contradictory confinement. Yabe, today when you go out, either it is day or it is night. You cannot come out and say, no, the one who says now is day and now is night, both of them are on haqq. La, this is contradictory. Day and night cannot come together within the same given period of time. And neither can you say it's neither day nor night. It has to be one or the other. Tayyib. If we understand this as a prerequisite, as a premise to our argument before we come into tafsir of the Quran, you find that we have hadith al-sharif that is narrated by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, where he says, Inni tarikun fikum al-thiklain, kitabullahi wa itrati ahla bayti. I leave behind you two weighty things, so long as you hold on to them. There are multiple versions of this hadith. Some of them say, which means that it was narrated by Rasulullah multiple times on multiple occasions. Multiplicity of the occurrence of the event. Some of these hadiths say, Ma in tamassaktum bihima lan tadhillu ba'di abada. So long as you hold on to the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, you shall never go astray. Muhim, hadith al-thakalain that says, Inni tarikun fikum al-thiklain kitabullahi wa itrati ahla bayti, meaning that refer back to the Quran. I leave behind you two weighty things, the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. Meaning that the tafsir of the Quran in its accurate mannerism is confined and restricted to Ahlul Bayt. The knowledge of the tafsir of the Quran in its entirety is within Ahlul Bayt. And hence Allah Azza wa Jal has granted us the Ahlul Bayt as divinely appointed guides who will give you this one accurate interpretation of the book of Allah. And they have been authorized to interpret the book in accordance by Allah, hence divinely sent. And from here you find that the interpretation of haqq in incorrect manners, the door is closed, because the divinely appointed guide is sent for this purpose. If we understand this, a side point, bain al-qawsain, between brackets, around this hadith al-thakalain, inni tarikun fikum al-thiklain kitabullahi wa itrati, this is the most commonly narrated version of hadith al-thakalain between the Sunni and the Shia, between the Khas and the Ammah. If you were to go back to Sahih Muslim, and you go back to Sahih Tirmidhi, and you go back to Sunan al-Bayhaqi, and you refer back to Majma'u Zawaid, that are from amongst the most important Sunni texts, you will find that Hadith al-Thakalain, Rasulullah says, Inni tarikun fikum al-thiklain kitabullahi wa itrati, not wa sunnati. Within the entire Islamic literature, the first person to say that Hadith al-Thakalain, Rasulullah said, Inni tarikun fikum al-thiklain kitabullahi wa sunnati. This hadith, even according to the books of the Sunnah, is a hadith shadh, meaning that it's an isolated, inaccurate, uncommon narration. The first one to have narrated it in this way was Malik ibn Anas. Malik ibn Anas, watara, when we have conversations such as these, the goal behind our conversation is to be able to engage in an academic, non-violent means of discussion. There is nothing more to this than that. There is no flavor of no sectarianism, no violence, no racism, wala shi. Our shughul, our work is with haqq in an academic manner. For if you were to refer back to Islamic text, you will see that the first person to narrate Hadith al-Thaqalain is Kitabullahi wa Sunnati, is Malik ibn Anas in his book Al-Muwatta. Malik ibn Anas is one of the 4 Imams of the schools of fiqh as per the school of thought of the Amma. This book Al-Muwatta was authored around, if my memory serves me right, between 148 to 158 AH. Meaning that this book was authored during the imamate of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja. And was authored as a book of fiqh that would serve to be the main fiqhi constitution of the Bani Abbas empire of the time. This was to sideline the fiqh and the madhab of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. فَعَلَمًا, when you come back to Hadith al-Thaqalain, you find that Hadith al-Thaqalain, what is mashhur, widely narrated and accurate in regards to Hadith al-Thaqalain was Kitabullahi wa Itrati. Tayyib. And you find that even the Quran tells you, فَاسْأَلُوا أَحْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Or you who believe, refer back to the Ahl al-Dhikr if you are not clear or you do not have knowledge in regards to the deen. You come back to the books of the Amma, you will find, for example, in Shawahid al-Tanzil, which is authored by one of the greatest ulama from the Sunnah, he states that the Ahl al-Dhikr over here is Alim Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja. So if we understand, Ahibba'i, that when it comes to understanding the Quran as the revealed word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our first and only point of reference is the Ahlul Bayt. If we have understood this as a muqaddimah, as an introduction, then we move on to the next point, which is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Bayyinah, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا أَن يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. What is Deenul Qayyimah? What is the meaning of Al-Qayyimah? Rather than go to speculation, I come back to Ahlul Bayt, who Rasulullah has commanded us to go back to by way of Thiqlain. I come and I ask the Imams, have the Imams mentioned for us what is Deenul Qayyimah? You come back to the Hadith Ahlul Bayt within Kitab al-Awalim, you find Hadith al-Sharif narrated by Maulana Imam Abu Ja'far Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja, where he says in the tafsir of Surah Al-Bayyinah verse number 5, Al-Qayyimah Fatimatu Zahra alayha salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja. Ajib. Deenul Qayyimah. Qayyimah yani Mawlati Fatemah. And from here, you enter into the ocean of tafsir in regards to the maqam and the fada'il of Alim Muhammad in the deen. What does it mean when Imam al-Baqir says Deenul Qayyimah is Fatemah alayha salam? The meaning of this is, number one, we will touch on 3 interpretations for the time that we have today, inshaAllah. Number one, the embodiment of the deen in its entirety, from Adam to Khatam, in these 5 principles of Tawheed and Ikhlas and being on Haqq, Hunafa and Salat and generosity, the peak of embodiment of the message of all the Anbiya is found within the Seerah of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra. And from here, Ahibba'i, you find that there is a bahath tatbiki. Bahath tatbiki, yani there is a discussion in tatbik, application of science. Just like the way in the majority of the sciences that we study in university, there is an aspect of an applied science and theoretical science. You have applied economics, theoretical economics. You have theoretical physics, you have applied physics. Similarly, when it comes to the deen and when it comes to tafsir, you have theoretical tafsir, you have applied tafsir. If you understand that Sayyida Zahra is the embodiment of the deen, which is a summary of the tabligh of 124,000 anbiya, you begin to understand the azamah, number one, of Sayyida Zahra. This is without doubt. You begin to understand the azamah and the status that is granted to a woman by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The role model and the embodiment of the efforts of 124,000 anbiya, the perfection of their efforts was manifested in a woman, Sayyida Zahra. And hence I need to come to myself at the point of application. The age in which we live, the generation in which we live. The role model of a woman, its embodiment is Sayyida Zahra. And you look at the challenges and the trials and the tribulations of the age in which we live. Intum ba'ad ahali Karachi, you are the residents of Karachi. You know your city, you know your town better than anyone else. But what I can tell you, between Iraq and Africa, the Europe, or UK in particular, and Canada, you look at the disgrace in which feminism and womanhood is viewed. The bahath. This is a discussion which is daruri, important, jiddan, extremely important. What is the role of an ideal, successful woman? Intum ahibai, in front of you, amamkum, in front of you, you have three choices. Three avenues through which you can understand the role of a woman, the ideal woman, whether you are a woman who is seeking your own identity, or you're a man who is looking for a spouse or raising a daughter. What is the ideal role model that represents the perfect role of a woman? You come to Western/atheistic culture, and you see over the last 15, 20, 30 years, under the slogan of women's rights, under the slogan of feminism, under the slogan of human rights, under the slogan of freedom, what has this atheistic culture done for women? What has it done for the women? Intum sarahatan. This is a bahath that requires tafakkur and tadabbur. Sa'at tafakkur, Rasulullah says, an hour worth of contemplation is better than 70,000 years of ibadah. Hi, this is this tafakkur. What has this atheistic culture, with all the fancy titles that they have used, what have they done for women? Today, women, to a great extent, have been reduced to nothing but objects that can be monetized and objects of lust. شوفوا انتم. This reality is not rocket science. somebody goes back to her own conscience and just looks. Just look. You want to buy man's deodorant, they will have the most. The word that I'm looking for doesn't come to my mind. They will use the most. They want to seduce you. They will use, this is the word, they will use, sometimes the computer program in translation between Arabic and English becomes slow. They will use the most seductive means of marketing to sell you a deodorant. The woman has become so cheap that she has to reveal her body and her beauty so you can buy a 3-pound bottle of deodorant. This is what civilization has brought women to. You look into the workforce as well. Majority of the workforce, what is the first thing that we are taught when it comes to interviewing? First impressions matter. Sahih Lola. What is the interpretation of a first impression? Majority of the times, if you go back to human psychology, books that are authored in human psychology, most of the times when it comes to first impression is the looks. A woman, regardless of the skill set that she possesses, to a great extent, the decision for her to be employed or not employed, to be successful or not successful in that field, is dependent on her looks. And behind this comes an entire industry to feed you a narrative of what beauty should mean. Even the definition of beauty in a woman, neither you nor does the woman herself have a right to dictate this. Intum shufu, the industries and the cultures in which we live. Even the definition of beauty is fed to you through a marketing industry. Islam came, by the way, Bain al-Qawsayn. UCLA issued a study. And if my memory serves me right, these are statistics between or up till 2017, either 2007 or 2017, where there was an increase in 52%, an increment of 52% cases of depression in young and adolescent girls up till the age of 2017 as a direct result of images fed to them on social media. Ani, I got to ask myself, as a woman, my worth is according to my physical appearance and my body? Is my worth equivalent to my mascara and my makeup? Enter, you have to ask yourself as a man, when you are selecting a spouse, my life partner, who is going to be the mother of my children, I'm going to value her based on her height, based on her complexion. How cheap man has become. Islam came, Sayyidah Fatemah al-Zahra came and turned this over. Hijab, tadrun, hijab means what? Hijab is a statement that me as a human being, as an individual, refuse for my worth to be measured by my physical looks. I am greater than this. If you want to value me, my value is in my intellect, in my ilm, in my knowledge, in my chastity. This understanding dictates our lifestyle choices. It dictates the manner in which we view life. فَأَمَانْكُمْ أَحِبَّائِ, in front of us, we have options. Where do I come and begin to understand the role of a woman or what an ideal woman is? On one hand, I have this atheistic culture that has reduced woman to the level of an object. On the other hand, I come and I find myself intertwined in the devaluation of woman through baseless culture. Culture even in Eastern countries. It is baseless culture that gives man the ability or the authority to justify domestic violence. And just like the way the atheist objectifies a woman under the name of freedom, over here, culture endorses domestic violence under the name of religion. Sahih Lola? You begin to get a flavor of how difficult the imtihan is for this generation. Because if I decide to be a cultural person and abide by my traditions, this is what is done to a woman. And if I run away from this and come to the West, what do I see in the West? The objectification of women. And hence, you find there is no other option but for you to come and seek Fatimah al-Zahra as the role model. This woman, ideal woman. Who is an ideal woman? How an ideal woman walks, how she dresses, how she lives. I'm not here to recite a majlis on that. My job over here is to instigate a flame of tafakkur, contemplation, the need to contemplate, the need to go back and research the seerah of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra, and then to implement it, because true happiness and true worth and value is only and only here. The embodiment and the perfection of the efforts of 124,000 Anbiya. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Tayyib, this is the first meaning of the word Dinul Qayyimah, or the first deduction that we can remove from by way of tafsir. This is an ocean. Number two, you come back. We said the verse of the Holy Quran summarizes the 5 aspects of the deen with which 124,000 Anbiya came to propagate. And the propagation of the message of 124,000 Anbiya is manifested in Sayyidah Zahra. From here, when you enter into the world of hadith, you begin to understand that Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra was the axis of ma'rifah for 124,000 Anbiya. Rather, it was from the fundamental duties of each and every one of the Anbiya to guide their ummah and educate their ummah in regards to the fada'il of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra. Dalil is where? Come back to the hadith again, found in Awalim al-Ulum Hadith al-Sharif, on authority of Imam Abu Ja'far, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, where he says, ما تكملت النبوة لنبي إلا حتى أكر بفضلها وبمحبتها وهي الصديقة الكبرى وعلى معرفتها دارت القرون الأولى. Imam al-Baqir says there is not a single Nabi from the Anbiya of Allah that were appointed as Nabis. Yani no Isa, Musa, Adam, Yusuf, Yaqub, not a single one of these individuals qualified or were appointed as prophets until and unless they projected and they established and they attested the ma'rifah, the fadl of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra. Hatta akarra bi fadliha وَمَحَبَّتِهَا, until they believed and attested in the superiority of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra and attested their love for Fatimah al-Zahra. وَعَلَى مَعْرِفَتِهَا دَارَتِ الْقُرُونِ الْأُولَى. It is upon her ma'rifah that the generations of the past circumambulated. Meaning what? The dawr of every one of these anbiya was to guide their ummah towards Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra, who is coming at the end of time. Don't underestimate the value of this Farsh Aza which you have come for tonight. This is a woman. The axis of existence revolves around her. I believe maybe our time is short. Nafsul hadith. Akhaf, maybe somebody comes and says, La Shaykhuna, these hadith are ghulu and they are exaggeration by the Shia and the sanad is weak and kada kada. Habibi, you will find the same hadith, if not with an ibara that is even more staunch in the books of the Sunnah, narrated by Abu Hurairah, Fara'idus Simtain. If you have a chance in the later majalis, I shall read you the entire hadith. Allahu Akbar min hadha al-hadith. Deenul Qayyimah, number 2. Al-Qayyimah is Fatimah al-Zahra, yani each Nabi, it was mandatory upon them to attest to the fada'il, the superiority, and to possess the love of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra. Number 2. Number 3. شوفوا الحديث الشريف. Look at Afwan. شوفوا the Quran al-Kareem. Refer back to this ayah, Surah Al-Bayyinah, verse number 5. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا أَن يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ حُنَفَاءَ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. Imam al-Baqir said Al-Qayyimah is what? Fatimah. Which means that Al-Qayyimah and Fatimah are synonyms. If Qayyimah means Fatimah, that means Fatimah means Qayyimah. These are synonyms. And you all know, as people who have been through the academic circle, the most basic rules in language, and this is a rule which is mushtarak, which is found in almost every language, whether it is Arabic, whether it is English, whether it is Urdu, that if you have words that are synonyms, they can be used interchangeably. Sahih Lola. So for example, insan and bashar. You can use insan interchangeably with bashar because both of them are synonyms to each other to a certain extent. If synonyms, the rule of language is that they can be used interchangeably. If they can be used interchangeably, if Qayyimah is Fatimah, and you refer back to this ayah of the Quran, what does it tell you? And they were not commanded, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا, they were not commanded except that they should do إِلَّا أَن يَعْبُدُوا اللَّهِ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ. They should worship Allah with ikhlas. They should stand on haqq. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ, and they should establish salat. وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةِ, they should give zakat. وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْفَاطِمَةِ. This is the deen of Fatimah. Allahu Akbar. Meaning that Islam, which is the deen of Rasulullah, in the tafsir of this ayah of the Quran, Allah is telling you that the deen of Fatimah is the deen of Rasulullah, which is the deen of Allah. The deen of Fatimah is the deen of Allah. Meaning what? Those who are not on the path of Fatimah are not on the path of Allah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajal. And from here, you begin to understand the gravity of what happened in Saqifa. The people of Saqifa and the event of Saqifa did Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra approve the government of Saqifa? La. Which means that they are not on the deen of Fatimah. And if they are not in the deen of Fatimah, as per the tafsir of this Quran, they are not in the deen of Allah or Islam. And there are numerous examples for this. That what happened in Saqifa does not represent Islam even in its slightest of forms. Even in its slightest of forms. And this is what Sayyidah Zahra was pointing towards. Ikhtilaf was not basit, was not something small that it didn't matter. La. One example of this, the event of Saqifa, which shows that this is not the deen of Allah, because if it is not the deen of Fatimah, it is not the deen of Allah. What is agreed upon by all historians, regardless of their sects, whether they are from the Amma or the Khasa, the Shia or the Sunnah, that bay'ah in Saqifa was taken forcefully. You refer back to one of the historians by the name of Yaqubi, Tariq Yaqubi. There is a narration stated by one of the Sahaba. Tariq Yaqubi is their historian, not ours. There is a historian, or there is a Sahabi by the name of Bara'a ibn Azib, or Bara'a ibn Azab. He states, this is in Tariq al-Yaqubi, that during the time that the Saqifa happened, he says, I was between the Masjid al-Nabawi and the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and as I came into the street, I saw three people. The one who was elected in the Saqifa, the one who was propagating his election, and number three, the one who was implementing the selection. Walking in the streets of Medina, forcefully making the people pledge bay'ah to the first one. This, Ahibba'i, has been an unprecedented event in the history of religion and the history of Islam, where a pledge of allegiance to accept a religious authority is done under violence. Unseen. Rasulullah forced anybody to believe in his Rasulah, in his Risala. You find anywhere in history that Rasulullah put his sword on the neck of somebody and said, if you don't believe in my Risala, I will kill you? Abadan la. You find the Amir al-Mu'mineen force anybody to accept his bay'ah or his imamat? Abadan la. You find Musa put a sword on somebody, if you don't believe in my nubuwah, I will kill you? Or Harun in the wasiyah of Harun? La. Enforcing or coercing people to submit to political leadership in addition to Islamic leadership under force was the first bid'ah to be committed in the name of religion. And hence this is not the deen of Fatimah, which means it is not the deen of Allah. And the Islamic Ummah has suffered from the consequences of this ila yawmina hada. Wherever you find. And to bring the meaning closer to you, Sawwiru, inshallah this has not happened. I'm fairly ignorant of the history of Pakistan, but inshallah this has not happened. So you can imagine in any given country at the time of elections, if there are a number of political parties, if the political party comes to your house, if the Time is over? Allah sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We can imagine if there was elections, the political party comes house to house and they put a gun on your head. If you don't vote for Fulan president, we're going to kill you. You call this a fair and free election? Even if you were to look at what happened after Rasulullah as a non-religious occurrence, leave, for example, for a moment the issue of whether an imam is divinely appointed by Allah or not. Keep on the side. You have two political parties that are contesting for legitimate leadership over the Islamic Ummah. For example, Faradan, this is Tanazulan. According to non-Shia texts, pledge of allegiance, which means the vote, was taken under forceful violence. Even a person who doesn't believe in deen, if you put this scenario in front of him and ask him, enter you and your dhamir, your conscience, is this a lawful means of leadership, of attaining leadership and power? Lola. What does the dhamir say? And this then went on, what happened in Saqifa, went on to become the trend of establishing political power in Islamic history until today. Karbala didn't just happen. One day Yazid woke up and said, we'll kill Imam al-Hussein. What happened in Karbala is a byproduct of a political theory that was created in Saqifa. Which is why Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra said to the people of Saqifa, what you are standing upon, or what you are performing now, what you are committing now, the crime that you are committing now, will never be able to be repaired. 1400 years till today, now we see this. Ala kullin, Ahibbai, tonight is Thursday night, Laylatul Jum'ah. Thursday night is a night to remember Imam al-Hussein and to remember the Shuhada of Karbala. And from the beginning of Ayyam Fatimiyah, the narrations mention to us on the day of Qiyamah, on the day of judgment, when the people are raised from their graves and they are in the Mahshar. The people who are there in the Mahshar will be called out, and the angel Jibreel shall make a cry and say, O people, lower down your gaze, for indeed Fatemah, the daughter of Rasulullah, is coming. The narration mentions that the entire Ahlul Mahshar, the entire human creation, shall lower their head and say, the Fatimah al-Zahra shall come into the Mahshar. She shall stand by the Arsh of Allah. The Hadith al-Sharif says that Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra will be holding a tasht that is covered. She will stand at the foot of the Arsh and she will say, Ya Allah ilahi ahkum bayni wa bayna man ظلمني. Ya Allah, I seek justice from you. Seek justice between me and those who oppressed me. So a caller will cry out from near the Arsh and say, O daughter of Muhammad, shall we seek justice from the one who is responsible for the killing of Muhsin? Allah, Allah. Sayyidah Zahra will say no. The Malaika will say, O Fatima, O daughter of Rasulullah, shall we seek justice for you for those who poisoned and shot arrows on the janazah of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba? Mujtaba. Sayyidah Zahra will say no, Ajib. The Malaika will come and they will say, O daughter of Rasulullah, shall we seek justice for you from the one who killed your son Imam al-Hussein? Allah. Sayyidah Zahra will say no, Ajib. The Malaika will say, O daughter of Rasulullah, who shall we seek justice for? Over here the narration mentions that Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra will remove the cover from this tasht, and inside the tasht are the severed arms of Mawlana Abul Fadl al-Abbas. So Sayyidah Zahra will say, Ya Allah, ihkam bayni, guide or rule between me and the one who severed these arms, because these arms belong to Abul Fadl. He conquered the Furat, but he didn't drink from the river. Allahu Akbar. Ahibai, Matamis, there's a very deep connection between Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra and Abul Fadl al-Abbas, and I want to narrate for you. Only 3 parts from the Masa'ib of Abul Fadl al-Abbas on the day of Ashura. The first one mentions over here that when Abul Fadl was coming back with the water in the mashk from the river Furat, he was attacked by the enemies until they severed the right arm of Abul Fadl. They severed the left arm of Abul Fadl. As Abul Fadl al-Abbas is on the horse without any arms, they began to shower arrows at Abbas from every direction. Ahibai, from the arrows that hurt Abul Fadl, there was one arrow that pierced the mashk. As the water was dripping onto the plains of Karbala, Abul Fadl's hopes also melted into the plains. And at this time, one of the enemies shot an arrow that pierced the eye of Abul Fadl. Matamis, if there is a grain of sand in your eye, you are not able to bear the pain of this. But there was an arrow in the eye of Abul Fadl. The narration mentions over here that an enemy struck Abul Fadl with a tent pole. When Abbas fell on the plains of Karbala, he fell face first and the arrow was pushed even deeper. Allah, Abul Fadl fell on the ground. The arrow was pushed even deeper. So he cried out and he said, Alayka minni salam ya Aba Abdullah. This is the second point. The Maktal says, when Imam al-Hussein heard the cry of Abul Fadl, he said, Al-an inkasara dhahri. Now my back is broken. Hamid ibn Muslim says that Imam al-Hussein went running towards Abul Fadl. Allah, ya Shia, I want to take you to Karbala tonight. Into it is as if you are Bayn al-Haramain, Allah. And you are watching Imam al-Hussein run from the Khaybaga to the Haram of Mawla Abbas alayhi salam. The Maktal says, Hamid ibn Muslim says, I saw Imam al-Hussein. Every time he ran, every 3 steps Imam al-Hussein took, he fell down to the ground. Imam al-Hussein would stand up, he would wipe his tears with his sleeve, he would run again, he would fall down. Hamid ibn Muslim says, I followed Imam al-Hussein until he came to a place on the Maidan. Imam al-Hussein fell down. Hamid says, I was waiting for him to stand up again. He says, instead I saw Imam al-Hussein clear something in the sands. He picked it up. He says, I wondered, what did Imam al-Hussein find in the Maidan? He says, I went a little bit closer. I saw Sayyid al-Shuhada sitting on the plains of Karbala. He picked one of the severed arms of Abul Fadl. He cleared the sand. He kissed the arm and he put it on his foot. This is the final part of my Masaib and Majlis Tamam, lovers of Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra. The Masaib of Abul Fadl was extremely difficult on Imam al-Hussein. It was extremely difficult on Imam al-Hussein. He did his without to Abul Fadl. Imam al-Hussein is coming back to the Khaymaga.
Inta Shii Muwali, imagine yourself sitting at the khaymaga. Imam al-Hussein has come back to the khaymaga. He doesn't know how to tell the women. He doesn't know how to tell the children that Abul Fadil has become Shaheed. These words, understand, these words are not coming out from the mouth of Imam al-Hussein. How do I say that Abbas is Shaheed to Zainab? How do I say Abbas is Shaheed to Sakina? Imam al-Hussein couldn't say this. So the Maktal says, he went into the khaymaga, he looked at the faces of the women and the children. But the strength to say Abbas is Shaheed is not coming out. So what did he do? Imam al-Hussein went and slowly he began dismantling the khayma of Abul Fadil. He began closing the khayma. From here, the women and the children understood Abbas is not coming back. And from the women and the children was Sakina. When Sakina understood this, Ya Shia, final and my Masaib is complete. Sakina went with her dry lips. She went and she held the hand of her father. She said, Baba, I'm not thirsty anymore. Tell my uncle to come. Matame Hussein, Matame Fatemah.